Chapter 1. The Drawing Room. James Hadley, composed beyond his 25 years, set down his coffee cup just as his mother lifted her teacup. "I've been thinking about Catherine." "Yes, dear," she said softly. "Her father returns in a fortnight. That will be a good time to speak with him." "Mother, where do we keep grandmother's ring?" His mother's teacup paused halfway to her lips. Across from him, his brother Edwin's attention lifted from the newspapers, though he said nothing. Her eyes flickered, and then she quickly reset her gaze, looking unfazed. "Grandmama's ring?" Her voice was carefully light. "Which one, dear?" James frowned slightly, confused by her confusion. "The emerald, of course. The one father gave you to pass on to me when I was ready to marry." The teacup remained suspended. The clock on the mantel ticked into the silence. His mother and brother exchanged a look. Slow, weighted, the kind of wordless conversation that happened between people who knew each other well. James glanced over at them both. He felt something shift in his chest. He leaned back in his chair, studying them. "You don't approve of a betrothal?" "Oh, darling, no." His mother set down her teacup with a soft clink. "It's not that exactly. Miss Catherine is perfectly suitable," his brother added, though the word suitable hung in the air like an apology. His mother's hands folded in her lap. "We'd approve of anything that made you happy, James." She paused, her eyes searching his face. "But are you happy?" "Of course I'm happy." The answer came too quickly. James straightened. "Catherine is the best thing to happen to me in a while. She makes me a better man. The changes I've made, the improvements in our—" He gestured vaguely, as though the evidence were obvious. He stopped. He could tell the benefits weren't as obvious to them. Compromise is part of any partnership. And these changes, they've been for the better. For the family, for the estate, for myself. His mother and brother exchanged another glance. "James," his brother said carefully, "there's no need to rush. A fortnight is soon." "Her father only just left for his travels a mere 2 weeks past," his mother added, her tone gentle. "We've all this planning to do for our annual race. You've time to think a bit more. To be certain?" "I am certain," he responded. "Even so." His mother's smile was soft, but her eyes held concern. "Marriage is not a decision to be made lightly, darling. Take time to reflect. Make sure this is what you truly want." His brother leaned forward slightly. "The sacrifices you've made these past few years, they've worked, James. The estate is stable now. We're in a far better position than we were. You don't need to marry for duty. You've earned the right to marry for love, for joy." His mother nodded. "You've both sacrificed too much. James, my darling, don't give away yourself as well." James opened his mouth to respond, but his mother rose gracefully, crossing to him. She placed a gentle hand against his cheek, her touch warm and familiar. "Promise me you'll think about it," she said quietly. "Just a few weeks. No decisions yet. Can you do that for me?" James looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. Then he nodded once. "Of course, Mother. For you, anything. But you'll see in time, too. This will be for the best." He stood, straightening his waistcoat, his expression settling back into that careful composure. "I should review the accounts before this afternoon's appointments." Before he reached the door, he heard his mother's reminder. "You do intend to represent us at the Thornbury ball tonight?" James looked back over his shoulder at his brother, wondering if he could convince him to take his place. Edwin quickly glanced back down at the Chronicle, evading his brother's stare. Edwin feigned serious concentration, but then realized he was reading the society pages and knew his brother would see right through him. So he decided to ignore James's silent plea directly, with a quick shrug that said, "Not a thing I can do." James held back a sigh, resigned now. "Of course," he said softly, and he walked back to kiss her on the cheek before he left the room. Chapter 2. The Ball. James accepted a glass of champagne from a passing footman and nodded politely as Lord Pemberton expounded on the merits of crop rotation. "Fascinating," James murmured at what seemed an appropriate interval. Pemberton's attention had already drifted toward a cluster of gentlemen near the card room. "Ah, yes, well, good to see you, Hadley." "And you." The conversation ended as it had begun. Without consequence, Pemberton moved away, and James stood precisely where he'd been standing for the past quarter hour, glass in hand, expression pleasant, thoughts nowhere in particular. The ballroom hummed with music and laughter. Dancers swept past in a blur of silk and candlelight. Somewhere to his left, a young woman's delighted shriek cut through the noise. Some joke, some moment of genuine joy he hadn't been part of, and wouldn't have created, even if he had been. He glanced over to his right as an elegant woman with honey-blonde hair appeared at his elbow, placing her graceful, white-gloved hand on the soft wall of his sleeve. Her cool blue gaze and measured smile, familiar and approving. "Well done, James. You've been very patient with Lord Pemberton. I know how tedious he can be." James took in her impeccable appearance, Catherine, always so lovely and fashionably composed with never a hair out of place. He tried to imagine what she would look like with it down, and failed. He shook off his wandering thoughts. He means well. Even so. She adjusted her glove with precise fingers. "Oh, there's Lady Ashford. I promised I'd speak with her about the charity luncheon. You don't mind?" "Of course not." She touched his arm briefly, proprietary, not affectionate, and glided away. James took a sip of champagne. It was excellent. He felt nothing about it whatsoever. A flash of green and red caught his eye. Lady Worthington's parrot, perched on her shoulder as always, surveying the ballroom with beady-eyed judgment. Dear Lord, the bird was as much a fixture at these events as the chandelier, though considerably less predictable. James watched with detached interest as the creature shifted unexpectedly, ruffled its feathers, and then, with what seemed like deliberate aim, relieved itself directly onto the shoulder of Lord Cranston's pristine evening coat. Cranston, deep in conversation with the Duke of Somerset, remained blissfully unaware. James's first instinct was to... He stopped himself, not his concern, not his place to intervene. But then he heard her. "Oh dear," she murmured, so quietly James shouldn't have heard it over the music. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear." A flash of pale blue silk and French lace. In one fluid motion, the woman had plucked a napkin from a passing footman's tray and began making her way toward Cranston with remarkable purpose. James found himself moving too. He didn't think about it, didn't weigh the propriety or consider whether it was his place. He simply reached for a glass of water from the nearest table and closed the distance to Cranston in 3 strides. "Lord Cranston," James said smoothly, positioning himself directly in front of the man and the Duke. "I've been hoping to speak with you about the irrigation proposal you mentioned last week." Cranston blinked, clearly startled by the interruption. "Ah, Hadley. Yes, of course, though perhaps this isn't. I think now is ideal, actually, James said as he smoothly held the water glass out, slightly to his left, arm extended, gaze never leaving Cranston's face. I've given it considerable thought, and I believe your approach has merit. Behind him, he felt rather than saw the young woman's approach, felt the whisper of silk, the deft movement as she dipped the napkin into the glass of water he held out toward her. The faintest brush of her fingers against his hand. She was gone in seconds. The key, of course, James continued, keeping Cranston thoroughly engaged, is ensuring proper drainage during the wet season. He talked for another minute, long enough for the woman to disappear into the crowd, long enough for the evidence to vanish. Then he extracted himself with practiced ease, leaving Cranston none the wiser and significantly cleaner than he'd been moments before. James turned, scanning the room. He found the woman in blue silk near the terrace doors, handing the soiled napkin to a footman with quiet instruction. The servant nodded and had just slipped away when James approached her from behind, wanting to say something admiring, feeling something that almost felt like amusement. As he approached, he noticed the sophisticated pearl hairpins in her thick black hair were barely containing her lawless curls. He pictured her hair tumbling free in glorious waves. Something unfamiliar stirring in his chest, realizing what had been so difficult for him to envision earlier, came so easily now, with her, someone he didn't even know. "That was well done," he said as he reached her side. She turned toward him, a smile already forming on her lips. Bright, genuine, conspiratorial. I couldn't very well let him discover it in front of the Duke, could I? The poor man would never. Her words stopped. Her eyes widened. It was him, taller than she remembered. Or perhaps she'd simply forgotten how he'd always towered over her. His face had lost the softer edges of youth, the angles sharper now, more defined. Dark hair swept back with severe precision. Nicky? The name hit him like a physical thing. Something in his chest cracked open, warmth flooding through the careful emptiness he'd cultivated. He smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't felt on his face in years. Her delicate face brightened like a cozy lamplight, being turned slowly up. And damn if he wasn't suddenly basking in the glow of it. "Oh, I'm afraid you're mistaken." Catherine appeared at his elbow, her expression pleasant but firm. Her hand settled on his arm again, with gentle possession. "This is Mr. James Hadley," she continued, her smile directed at Sophie with polite correction. "Perhaps you've confused him with someone else." Her one eyebrow raised. The warmth in James's chest turned cold. Sophie watched the transformation, fascinated. Those familiar brownish-black eyes that used to dance with mischief, that used to sparkle down at Sophie daily, were suddenly flat, shuttered. Sophie's gaze flickered between them, confusion clouding her features. Her smile faltered but didn't quite fade. "No, I'm certain." James felt himself straightening, the ease draining from his posture. The mask settling back into place, familiar and suffocating. Sophia. Her full name felt wrong in his mouth, too formal, too distant. But he said it anyway. "It's been a long time." Sophie's eyes searched his face, as though looking for something she'd lost. He'd never called her Sophia before. The silence stretched for a beat too long. "Yes," she said finally, her voice careful. 6 years. She glanced at Catherine's hand on his arm, then back to his face, Whatever she was thinking, she kept it behind that cautious smile. "How is your family?" she asked, and there was genuine warmth there despite the strangeness between them. "Your mother, especially. I've thought of her often." Something in James's expression softened. "She's well. She would be delighted to see you, I'm certain." "I should very much like to call on her," Sophie said. "It's been a whirlwind since we returned. This is actually my first proper outing back in society, but I fully intend to visit." "She would love that." The words came more easily now, though the formality remained. "You're always welcome." James cleared his throat, remembering himself. "Forgive me, Miss Sophia Hartwell," he said tentatively, realizing her surname might have changed. Had it changed? She nodded quietly, as if knowing what he was thinking, and assuring him her name was the same. "Miss Sophia Hartwell, may I present Miss Catherine Brennan?" "Miss Brennan." Sophie dipped into a polite curtsy, her smile warm but measured. "A pleasure. Miss Hartwell." Catherine's acknowledgement was equally proper, her posture perfect. "Are you recently returned to town?" "Just last week my father was abroad, diplomatic service, but we've settled back now." "How lovely." Catherine's tone was pleasant, empty. "I'm sure you have much to attend to after such a long absence." It wasn't quite a dismissal, but it was close. Sophie's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. "Indeed, which is why I should let you both return to your evening." She looked at James once more, and he felt that gaze like a question he couldn't answer. "It was good to see you again. And you, Sophia." She curtsied again, murmured her farewells, and slipped back into the crowd with the same quiet efficiency she'd shown with Lord Cranston's coat. James watched her go, that strange warmth in his chest fading back to nothing. Catherine's hand tightened slightly on his arm. "An old acquaintance?" "Childhood friend," James said. "The families were close before they left for the continent." "Ah." Catherine's tone was light, final. "How nice that she's returned." Chapter 3. The Course Ride. James was reviewing correspondence in the library when his brother appeared in the doorway, still in his riding coat. "Are you certain about not attending the annual race?" James nodded firmly in response, recalling the latest conversation with Catherine and her need for his presence at the charity event. His brother watched him intently, weighing his next words. "You do know that Mother convinced Sophie to assist in your absence?" James looked up. "I'm aware she offered her support." "You might want to come down to the stables," his brother said, tone deliberately casual, in that way that meant something was happening. James looked back down at his letter and at the stack of correspondence. "I have several matters to attend to this afternoon. Miss Hartwell is about to ride the course." The pen stopped moving. "Alone?" James heard himself ask. "Well, Henderson was going to accompany her, but his mare threw a shoe this morning." His brother leaned against the doorframe. "We are taking different sections to check them properly before the race. Make sure it's safe. I'm assisting with the fields on the other side of the carriage house, which have their own issues, and several of us are about to clear a few obstacles. Sophie is checking the jump near the creek, as it is still questionable after last week's rain." James set down his pen with careful precision. "Mother approved this?" "Mother suggested it, actually," Miss Hartwell offered. A pause. She's apparently an excellent rider. Improved abroad, I gather. Of course she had. Of course she'd offered. Of course she was already handling what James should have been managing himself. He should return to his correspondence. He should trust that she, her brother, and the staff could handle it. He should. He was already standing. "I'll need to change," he said, moving toward the door. His brother's smile was knowing. "I thought you might." Sophie was already mounted when James arrived, seated on a spirited grey mare that danced sideways with barely contained energy. She wore a deep blue riding habit, her posture easy and confident, one hand steady on the reins. She looked like she belonged there, like she'd never left. Her deep blue gaze shifted toward him, and she seemed surprised but not displeased to see him. "Nicky, James, I was told you had other obligations this afternoon." "The course needs 2 riders," he said, nodding to the groom to prepare his horse. "Henderson's mare is lame. I'm perfectly capable of—" "I'm certain you are." His usual gelding was brought out, and he swung into the saddle with the ease of long practice. "But the jump near the creek has been troublesome. It's better to have a second set of eyes." It wasn't quite the truth, or rather, it was true, but incomplete. She studied him for a moment, then smiled, cautious but genuine. "Well then, shall we?" They set off toward the course at an easy canter, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. The estate stretched out before them, green and golden, and achingly familiar. James had forgotten how good this felt. "The first jump is just beyond that hedgerow," he said, his voice still measured, formal. "We'll take it at moderate pace to assess." Sophie was already ahead of him. She cleared the hedgerow with easy grace, the mare's hooves tucking neatly over the obstacle. She glanced back over her shoulder, grinning. "Moderate pace," she called. "When did you become so cautious?" Something sparked in his chest. Irritation, maybe. Or challenge. He urged his gelding forward and took the jump faster than he'd intended, landing smoothly on the other side. Sophie had already moved on to the second obstacle, a fallen log that required a slight angle of approach. "The angle's wrong from this side," James called out, drawing alongside her. "Come at it from the left. There, see where the ground dips." She adjusted without question, trusting his judgment, and sailed over cleanly. "Better," he admitted. "I'll make note of it for the race." She was already scanning ahead. "What about that stone wall? It looks higher than I expected." "It is. We added 2 rows last year." He moved ahead, demonstrating the approach. "You need speed for this one, but controlled. Let the horse see it clearly before." He took it, felt the powerful surge of the gelding beneath him, the perfect moment of suspension, the clean landing. When he looked back, Sophie was already airborne. She whooped as she cleared it, pure unself-conscious delight, and the sound cut through something in James's chest. When was the last time he'd heard that kind of joy? When was the last time he'd felt it? "That was wonderful," she was laughing, breathless. "Again? We're supposed to be assessing the course, not—" But she was already circling back. The creek jump came into view as they rounded the far edge of the property. James slowed, his expression shifting from open to focused. The obstacle was deceptively challenging, a moderate jump over the narrow creek itself, but the approach had been carved into a hillside, and recent rains had left the ground soft and unpredictable. "This is the one?" Sophie asked, pulling up beside him. "Yes, the footing on approach is uncertain, and the landing on the far side," he pointed. "See how the bank has eroded. A horse could catch a hoof if they land wrong." Sophie studied it, her brow furrowed. We should reinforce the landing. Add gravel, perhaps some packed earth to level it. Agreed, but we need to know exactly where the weak points are first. James dismounted, handing his reins to Sophie. I'll walk it. Let me come with you. He nodded, and she slid down from her mare with easy grace. They walked the approach together, James pointing out the softest patches of ground, Sophie testing the bank's stability with her boot. At one point, the ground gave slightly beneath her foot, and she stumbled. James's hand shot out instinctively, steadying her elbow. Careful. Thank you. She didn't pull away immediately. They were standing close now, close enough that he could see the faint flush of exertion on her cheeks, the brightness in her eyes from the ride. You were always the best at this race. I tried my hardest to win, but you always, well, you were just so stunning to watch. Her deep blue eyes alight from the memory of the races when they were younger. He watched her face intently as she spoke, so animated, so admiring. How free they'd been. Together. But that was a long time ago. That was another man, he thought. That whole section will need work, he said seriously. We'll have it fixed before the race, he said, but his voice had lost its formality somewhere between the hedgerow and here. Will you be racing? The question was casual, but her eyes were searching his face. James looked away. No, I have other commitments that day. The silence stretched. Other commitments, she repeated slowly. More important than your family's tradition. He should have a ready answer. Should explain about Catherine's charity luncheon, about the importance of supporting her endeavors, about duty and partnership, and all the reasonable justifications he'd constructed. Instead, he said quietly, I'm expected elsewhere. Expected? Sophie turned the word over like she was testing its weight. Not wanting to be elsewhere. Expected. It's the same thing, is it? She asked gently. James met her eyes then, and found her watching him with that same searching expression from the ball, like she was looking for someone who wasn't quite there. What happened to you, Nicky? The question was soft, not accusing, just bewildered, sad even. The name shouldn't have affected him the way it did. But hearing it here, standing in the grass with mud on his boots and his hair disheveled from the ride, still breathing hard from the exhilaration of it, he felt the careful architecture of the past 6 years crack. I grew up, he said, but even to his own ears it sounded hollow. No, Sophie shook her head slowly. Growing up doesn't make you disappear. James had no answer for that. Sophie seemed to recognize she'd pushed far enough. She looked back at the creek jump, her expression shifting back to practical assessment. We should mark where the reinforcements need to go, she said quietly, before we forget. He nodded, grateful for the retreat into logistics. They spent the next 20 minutes walking the course, making notes, discussing improvements. The conversation stayed safely technical, gravel and drainage and approach angles. But something had shifted between them. When they finally remounted and rode back toward the stables, the silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy with things unsaid. As they handed off their horses to the grooms, Sophie turned to him one more time. Thank you for riding with me today, she said, then paused. She hesitated. I saw him, just for a moment, the boy I used to know. Before James could respond, she'd already turned away, heading back toward the house. He stood in the stable yard long after she'd gone, her words echoing in his head. Growing up doesn't make you disappear. Chapter 4. The Rock. 2 weeks had passed, and the improvements needed for the day of the race were steadily getting checked off the list. Sophie had slid back into their old ways, visiting each day, tackling each task with a measure of pride and accomplishment. She and James were finding a new comfortable space for their friendship to dwell, given their proximity, not close and comfortable as in their youth, yet not as tightly buttoned as James had become. It was somewhere in the middle, in the liminal space. Sophie was done with the major tasks for the day. She saw James across the lawn, and something mischievous sparked in her eyes at a sudden memory. "Race you," she called, and took off running before he could respond. James stood frozen for a heartbeat, shocked, improper. She couldn't just. Then his feet were moving. He ran after her, his careful composure forgotten, lungs burning in the best way. She was fast, her skirts held up, laughing as she dodged around a tree. She was heading for the lake, for their spot. The large rock that hung over the water came into view. Sophie reached it first, barely, and spun to face him, triumphant and breathless. "I won," she declared. "You cheated," James accused, but he was smiling, genuinely smiling, as he bent over, hands on his knees, catching his breath. "Didn't even give me a chance to—" "That's called strategy," Sophie interrupted, grinning at him from the edge of the rock. She looked glorious standing there, windswept, flushed, radiant with joy. The wind had tumbled her hair into a wild, living thing. The afternoon sun caught on her face, in her hair, and she was looking at him like he was Nicky again, like the past 6 years had never happened. James felt something in his chest expand, something he'd thought he'd lost. Their eyes locked and time tumbled away like an avalanche. They gazed at each other, knowing they were here, together, just as they had been then. Loving, joyful, connected, accepting. No barriers. He suddenly felt stripped bare, with no way to retreat, nowhere to hide as her eyes took him in. He couldn't breathe. She simply radiated light, understanding, love. He couldn't bear it. He felt as if his heart were ready to implode. Then she grinned, that silly grin that tugged at his heart, and his nostrils flared in his effort to finally take in oxygen. Then Sophie took a step back, spread her arms wide, and tipped her head back, enjoying the feel of the wind as it whipped around her, through her hair, gluing her dress to her petite frame. Then, with a look of complete peace, she let herself fall, backward, into the water, free and laughing and utterly, beautifully herself. She surfaced moments later, hair plastered to her face, water streaming down, still laughing. "Come on," she called up to him. "The water's perfect." James stood at the edge of the rock, heart still pounding from the run. He should scold her, should remind her this was inappropriate, should offer his hand like a proper gentleman and help her out. He couldn't move. She spun in the water, sending droplets flying, catching the late afternoon sun like scattered diamonds. She looked like joy made flesh, wild and free, and utterly unself-conscious, and he felt like he was watching her through glass. His chest was tight, his throat was tight. Everything in him was wound so carefully, so correctly, and watching her. Something cracked, not breaks, not yet, but cracks. "Nicky?" Her voice was softer now, the laughter fading. She'd stopped spinning, just treading water, looking up at him. She saw something in his face, something he couldn't hide. He wanted to jump. God, he wanted to jump. Wanted to fall backward into that water and feel the shock of cold and the freedom of letting go and the simple, thoughtless joy of it. But his feet wouldn't move. His body wouldn't obey. He's forgotten how. Sophie stopped treading water. She was watching him, really watching him. And whatever she saw in his face made her go still. She didn't call to him again. Instead, she swam to the edge and pulled herself out, water streaming from her riding habit, hair hanging in dark ropes down her back. She should look ridiculous. She looked magnificent. She wrung out her skirt with brisk efficiency, then crossed to where he stood and simply sat. Right there on the rock beside him, legs dangling over the edge, exactly as they used to sit when they were children. She didn't say anything. James sank down beside her, his heart still racing, something enormous and nameless pressing against his ribs. They sat in silence, the only sound the gentle lap of water against stone and Sophie's quiet breathing as she caught her breath. The sun was warm on his shoulders. The rock was solid beneath him. Sophie was close enough that he could feel the faint chill coming off her wet clothes. He hasn't felt this present in years. Neither of them spoke. Their hands found each other, slowly, naturally, fingers interlacing like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Perhaps they had, once upon a time. The silence held everything. Chapter 5. Sophie's explosion. A few days later, Catherine arrived at Windermere. She settled into the drawing room. The ice blue of her gown matched her eyes, her posture perfect as always. Catherine reached out to touch his arm. "I'm so looking forward to Saturday, James. The arrangements are nearly complete. Lady Ashford has confirmed, and the patroness from Sophie, who had been reviewing seating charts with James's mother across the room, went very still. Saturday. The annual races were on Saturday. It means so much that you'll be there," Catherine continued, her smile warm and exclusive. "I know the estate race is the same day, but as we've discussed, you've outgrown such frivolities. Your support shows how much you've matured." The seating chart crumpled slightly in Sophie's hand. She stood abruptly, her smile fixed and brittle. "Please excuse me. I've just remembered." She didn't finish the excuse, already moving toward the door. James was on his feet immediately, some instinct overriding propriety. "Excuse me, ladies. Sophie," he called out, but she was already in the hallway, walking quickly, her shoulders rigid. He followed. "Sophie, wait." She didn't stop. She made it through the door to the terrace, down the steps to the garden. She had no idea where she was heading. She just needed to be away. Away from him. Away from the confusion. Away from feeling somehow betrayed. "Sophie, please." Something in his voice broke her stride. She whirled around, hoping to see Nicky, only to see whoever this other person was that he had become. Her eyes blazed. "A luncheon?" Her voice was low but shaking. "You're missing your family's race for a luncheon?" James stopped short. "It's not just it's a charitable event. It's important." "Important." She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "Your family's tradition. Something they've done for generations. Something you used to live for. And you're abandoning it for what? Sandwiches and society matrons discussing needlework for the poor." "Sophie, that's not fair." "Not fair." Her voice rose despite herself. "What's not fair is watching your mother try to manage everything alone because her son who used to organize this, who used to race in it, has decided he's too important now, too serious for family traditions. The estate needed." She held up a hand. "Don't." Her eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. "Don't you dare hide behind duty. This isn't about the estate. This is about her." James felt his jaw tighten. "Catherine's event is important to her. I made a commitment. And what about your commitment to your family? Sophie's voice cracked. What about... She stopped herself, looking away. What? Nothing. Sophie. She looked back at him, and the hurt in her eyes made his chest constrict. I thought, on the rock, when we sat there, when you... She swallowed hard. I thought maybe you were still in there somewhere, the boy who jumped first and thought later, who laughed at everything, who made everyone around him feel special, feel alive. I'm not that boy anymore. No. Her voice went quiet, devastated. You're not. You're James now. Respectable, appropriate, invisible, and completely empty. The words hit like a slap. That's not... He started. She called it a frivolity, James. Sophie's anger returned, sharp and clean. Your family's event, your tradition. She called it frivolous, and you let her. You stood there and let her dismiss something that matters, something that should matter. Because what? She approves of you this way? She likes you better when you're half alive. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. She stepped closer, and he could see she was trembling. You've decided you weren't good enough, and instead of proving you were, you became someone else entirely. Someone your father wouldn't even recognize. Someone I don't recognize. Her breath hitched. I'm furious that you chose something politically, societally motivated over your own family. I'm hurt that Catherine clearly means so much to you that you'd make this choice. And I'm... Her voice broke. I'm confused, because on that rock, I thought. She turned away sharply. It doesn't matter what I thought. She walked away, leaving James standing alone at the edge of the garden, her words ringing in his ears. His brother stepped out from the terrace. He'd heard everything. I'm sorry, brother, his brother said quietly. James couldn't respond. His throat was too tight. Chapter 6. The Brothers. James couldn't sleep. He'd tried. He'd lain in bed for 2 hours staring at the ceiling. Sophie's words ricocheting through his mind. You're James now. Respectable, appropriate, invisible, and completely empty. Growing up doesn't make you disappear. Your father wouldn't even recognize you. Finally, he'd given up and gone down to the library, thinking a drink or work or something might quiet his thoughts. The estate ledger sat open before him, but he hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. The door opened quietly. His brother stood in the doorway, still dressed, as though he'd been waiting for this. Couldn't sleep either, his brother asked, crossing to pour himself a brandy. Would you like a drink? James shook his head. His brother settled into the chair across from him, glass in hand, saying nothing for a long moment. She's right, you know, James said finally. Sophie. Edwin let out a long breath, slumping back in his chair. I know. What are you going to do? I don't know. James rubbed his face with both hands. I've spent years becoming this. I don't know how to be anything else anymore. His brother took a slow sip of brandy, considering. Do you remember the day Father asked you to review the contracts? James stiffened. Of course I do. You went riding instead. I know. The words came out flat, heavy, with old guilt. I was irresponsible, careless. If I'd just... He wasn't angry, James. James looked up sharply. He wasn't angry, his brother repeated, quieter. Concerned that you didn't understand the estate's situation yet. But not angry, and certainly not expecting this. He gestured at James, at the careful, rigid man he'd become. This, whatever this is that you think you need to atone for. The estate was failing. James insisted. Edwin interjected. Winmere was struggling, because father made poor investments years before either of us could have prevented it, because the previous steward was incompetent, because he kept it to himself for far too long, because a dozen things went wrong that had nothing to do with you being young and in love with your best friend. James looked at him with troubled eyes. You weren't the problem, Nicky. His brother leaned forward. You were never the problem. James said nothing, his throat tight. His brother set down his glass. Father worked very hard to keep it from us, you know, the full extent of it. He didn't want us to worry, didn't want us to feel the weight of it before we had to. He paused. He wanted you to be young while you still could be, to laugh, to ride, to be as free and unencumbered by his mistakes for as long as possible. Then why? James's voice cracked. Why did he ask me to help? Why did he look so tired when I came back that day? Because he was tired, James. He'd been carrying everything alone, by his own choice, but then finally admitted he needed help a little too late. That's all. Not because you'd failed him, because he needed his sons just sooner than he allowed us to realize. His brother's expression softened. And when you stepped up after he died, when you took on so much, he would have been proud. But not because you stopped being yourself. He would have hated that. James looked away, blinking hard. I miss him, Edwin said quietly, every single day. But do you know what else I miss? He waited until James met his eyes. I miss my brother, the one who made everyone in a room feel lighter just by walking into it, the one who could find joy in anything, the one who laughed so freely people couldn't help but laugh with him. His voice roughened. I miss him. I miss you. And I think you do too. James's breath hitched. You're allowed to be happy, James. You're allowed to be yourself. Father never asked you to disappear. The estate never asked you to disappear. The only person demanding you stay buried, he leaned back, is you. James's hands were shaking. He gripped the arms of his chair to still them. Tomorrow, you have a choice to make, his brother said gently, the race or Catherine's luncheon. But more than that, you have to choose who you're going to be. Are you going to keep performing? Or are you going to start living again? He stood, placed a hand on James's shoulder. Warm, solid, real. You don't find yourself all at once, Nicky. You practice being yourself until it becomes natural again. Tomorrow, start practicing. He left James alone in the library, the words hanging in the air like a promise or a challenge. Chapter 7. The Charity Event. James was shown into the Brennan drawing room at precisely 10 o'clock. Catherine rose to greet him, perfectly dressed as the hostess of the event, her expression pleased. You're early. How thoughtful. I was just checking the arrangements for Catherine. His voice was steady, but something in his tone made her pause. Might we speak privately for a moment? Her smile faltered slightly. She glanced at her mother, who sat by the window with her embroidery. Of course. She gestured to her mother, who rose with a look and excused herself. The door closed softly. Catherine turned back to him, her composure perfect, but her eyes watchful. Is something wrong? I won't be attending the luncheon today. The words came out more bluntly than he'd intended, but there was no gentle way to say it. Catherine blinked. I beg your pardon? I'm attending my family's race instead. I should have... James. She stepped closer, her hand reaching for his arm in that familiar, guiding way. I understand you're feeling conflicted, but we've discussed this. The luncheon is critically important. Lord and Lady Ashford will be there, and the patroness from— Catherine, he started. Catherine's eyes drifted downward, thinking through her response and how best to adjust her tone. And you gave your word. Everyone is expecting you. The seating arrangements are finalized. Her voice remained reasonable, as though she simply needed to talk him back to his senses, like so many times before. I know your family's event holds sentimental value, but surely you can see that this is more important, more appropriate for someone in your position. Catherine, there are no words that will convince me to change my mind. I came to apologize for the lack of notice. I am truly sorry. Her fingers tightened on his arm, not painful but insistent, controlling. James looked down at her hand, then back up at her face. Something shifted in his expression. This isn't a discussion, he said quietly. Of course it is, she said firmly. Her grip tightened further, her tone taking on an edge beneath the pleasantness. You're simply being emotional. Once you think clearly about the commitments you've made, the people who are counting on you. Catherine. He reached up and carefully, deliberately, removed her hand from his arm. My priority is my family. It should have been all along. Her eyes widened. You can't be serious. I am. But you gave your word. I know, and I apologize for the inconvenience, but I'm not the man you think I am. He paused. I'm not the man I've been pretending to be. Her eyes flashed. Pretending? James, you've become respected. After my father died, he stopped, searching for words. I fell into something. Grief, guilt. I convinced myself I needed to be different, better, more serious. And you— He looked at her, really looked at her. You reinforced every change I made, every part of myself I buried. You've become a gentleman of standing. I became an empty shell of a man. The words hung between them. Catherine, please understand. His voice softened. This is not about you. I've lost myself. I've spent years becoming someone I'm not. And I won't continue. It isn't fair to you, and it's destroying me. Her face had gone pale, then flushed with anger. So what? You're just leaving? Because of a horse race? Because some childhood friend returns and suddenly you want to be— what? Frivolous again? Irresponsible? There it was. The word she'd probably always thought, but never said. No, James said quietly. I want to be myself again. He waited, some part of him still hoping she would understand, that she'd soften, that she'd support him. Instead, she straightened, her expression hardening. And who is that exactly? The boy who shirked responsibility? Who chose pleasure over duty? Who laughed, James said, something breaking loose in his chest. Who enjoyed life? Who was not solely focused on propriety and respectability? Someone who cared more for his family than society. That's not who you are anymore, James. You've matured. You've become better than that. And there it was, better than that. She didn't want him to be himself. She wanted him to stay buried. No, Catherine. His voice was firm now, final. I haven't become better. I've become empty, and I'm done. He turned toward the door, suddenly exhausted, disappointed. He'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that she might understand, that there might be some part of her that cared about him more than her social climbing. There wasn't. His hand was on the door handle when her voice cracked behind him. You're throwing away everything we've built together. The careful composure was gone now, her voice rising. 2 years, James. 2 years of guiding you, supporting you, helping you become someone worthy of... He turned back, something cold settling in his chest. Worthy? Yes, worthy. Do you think I would have... She stopped herself, but not quickly enough. Would have what? He asked. His voice was quiet, dangerous almost. Accepted my courtship? If I'd been myself? She said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. James felt something in him go very still, very calm. Thank you, he said softly, for making this easier. I opened the door, paused, looked back one last time. I'm sorry I wasted your time. And then he was gone. Chapter 8. The final race. The riders had completed all of the formal races, and there was an air of celebration in the air for the teams and the individuals who had won. They each assembled at the starting line for the final race of the day, the estate race, where the prize was less serious, and fun was the focus. The House of Windermere on the left and the visiting participants' team on the right. James sat astride his gelding, his brother not far away, their mother's colours pinned to their chests. Sophie was 3 riders down, her grey mare dancing with anticipation. Their eyes met across the line. Something passed between them. Challenge, recognition, partnership. Sophie's lips curved into a grin. James felt an answering smile pull at his own mouth, genuine and unbidden. The starting gun cracked. The horses surged forward, hooves thundering against earth. James cleared the first jump, his body moving with the rhythm he'd almost forgotten. Sophie took a sharp turn with fearless precision, her laugh carrying over the wind. Left side, James calling out as they approached the creek, warning the rider beside him. Sophie glanced back, catching his eye, nodding, pure trust. The course blurring past, hedgerows and stone walls and open fields. James's heart was pounding, not with anxiety, but with life. Sophie pulled ahead at the final stretch. Her hair escaped its pins, wild and free. The finish line was approaching, the crowd roaring. Team Windermere crossed together, a surge of riders in blue and silver. Victory. The team erupted in celebration, shouts and laughter, and breathless congratulations. Someone clapped James on the shoulder. His brother was there, grinning. His mother's face was bright with pride and joy. But James was searching the crowd of riders. Sophie had dismounted, still catching her breath, her face flushed and radiant. Their eyes locked. Everything else, the noise, the celebration, the people, faded to the background. She was smiling at him, not James, and he was smiling back as himself for the first time in 6 years. Chapter 9. The Rock. Sunset. James found her by the lake, standing at the edge of their rock, looking out over the water. The celebration had faded behind them, voices distant and soft. Sophie. She turned, and the smile on her face was everything. Nicky. His chest tightened. I'm sorry for disappearing, for forgetting what it is to feel, what we felt those years ago, for wasting so much time being someone I'm not. She pressed 2 of her fingers gently against his lips, stopping the words. I'm sorry too. I missed you, she said simply. Something in him broke open, not painfully but like light flooding in. She lowered her hand and held it out to him instead. He took it, and they climbed onto the rock together, settling into the familiar places they'd occupied as children. Side by side, legs dangling over the edge, hands clasped between them. The sun was setting, turning the water gold and rose. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The weight he'd been carrying for 6 years, the guilt, the performance, the constant measuring of himself against an impossible standard. It wasn't gone. But sitting here, Sophie's hand warm in his, watching the sun sink below the horizon, it felt lighter. He felt lighter. "Thank you," he said finally, quietly. Sophie squeezed his hand. "Welcome home." He gently lifted her hand to his lips, softly kissing the edge of her hand where her fingers began, grateful for this, for her, for family. He lifted his gaze toward the golden hour reflecting across the water. They sat together as the sky deepened to purple, then indigo. Then the first stars appeared. Just sitting, leaning, just being, just themselves. The end.